2-minute video. We're gonna just hear the audio.
Hi, I'm Fabio Carrera, the founder and director of the Venice Project Center. I started the center in 1988, being a native of Venice, just 4 years after I graduated from WPI with my bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering. Since 1988, we brought over 800 WPI students to Venice to work on over 250 research projects on all issues affecting the city and its citizens. Over the 3 decades, we were able to study everything from the canals of Venice to bridges to pedestrian traffic to boat traffic, the preservation of heritage in the city, from public art to museum art pieces, creating all kinds of databases and maps of the situation that we found over the years. Most recently, this year, on the 30th anniversary of the Venice Project Center, we have acquired a new space in Venice, a former church of Saints Cosmas and Damian in the Giudecca island of the city. A church that, as you can see, has been rehabbed to host an incubator called H3. And what we're doing right now is to continue in our process of contributing to the city's preservation and development by creating jobs in the city based on the 30 years of data collected. So we have 10 startups that we want to start in Venice, and the WPA teams have been collaborating with some of these in the past years. And for the next 10 years, we plan to create over 100 jobs in the city by creating 10 startups at least of 10 people each, all in some way related to issues studied by WPI students in the past 30 years. WPI teams will be hosted in H3 from now on. So the 30th anniversary of the Project Center, which starts in B term of 2018 and ends in B term 2019, will be a celebration of the impacts that we can make in the city and we have made in the city, but also looking at the future and how we can turn all this research into actual solutions made in Venice by Venetians to solve the problems of Venice, and then hopefully use Venice as our testimonial to resell these same solutions to other historic cities of the world. So we hope that students from WPI will continue to find Venice a very challenging and interesting place to come and do their IQP in, and hope to see you all in Venice soon. who's going to tell us about repopulating Venice and what we can do about it and all the work that they've done. Please.
Good evening, everyone. We are a team of students that have been working with Serendipity in a partnership with SmartDest, focusing on exploring depopulation throughout Venice and the socioeconomic factors that drive it. My name is Thomas Walsh. This is Alex Bolduck, Bridget Redgate, and Irunis Esma. Our project goal is to contribute to the SmartDest project in order to identify, understand, and explore the root causes of depopulation and the impact of job diversity, housing, and mobility on depopulation. SmartDest is a European Union-funded project tackling social exclusion in cities affected by tourism-related mobilities, specifically in Venice. We've been focusing on the social exclusion of residents, while in other cities like Israel, they've been focusing on the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians, and in Barcelona, they've been focusing on the exclusion of women and members of the LGBTQ+ community. Serendipity is the leader of the case study in Venice. The Venice case study has pinpointed the effects of job diversity, housing, and mobility as the main causes for the exclusion of residents. To begin, we looked into the background of the declining population throughout history. This is an animated graphic we made showing the population from about the year 1300 to today. The population of Venice has been in a steady decline since post-World War II, and peaked in 1951 with about 175,000 people, where today it's at about 50,408. That number was actually pulled this morning from our own scraped data of the residents of the city. Throughout history, we can generally pinpoint different events that have caused the residential decline. These main causes began with the Black Death in the 1340s, which previously boasted the lowest population. Venice has been affected by plague over the last several centuries, with the main plague in 1575 being remembered today with the holiday Salute, where we remember the end of the plague. The final decline was caused by the fall of the Republic of Venice and the First Italian War of Independence against the Austrians. The population has consistently rebounded due to the attractiveness of the city. To begin with, they were leaders in trade and were a central hub for industrialization. Following, they moved into cheaper housing. After the many deaths of the plagues, they had very cheap housing, and it encouraged people to move into the city. And finally, today, our peak came from the urbanization of the city. After all these ups and downs, we are left with the main question: will the population rebound again, and what can we do to encourage it? Continuing looking into the population, we are facing a shortage of young residents as the driving concern for the future. In 2010, the main group of people was residents aged 45 to 49, with just about 4,600 residents. That same group of people in 2020, now aged 55 to 59, has just above 4,300 residents, a near 300-person drop. Moving on to the bottom of the graphic, you can see that the younger Venetians are not moving up the ladder. As older generations age and pass on, it's causing a loss of 2/3 of the population. The chart follows each group through the past decade, displaying the net change for each group's population. Moving from left to right, the leftmost two bars show a decline of children who were born in Venice and left while still very young. These choices were most likely made by their parents to either move out of the city for work or for better, more affordable housing. Next, we move on to the first and only positive change age groups over the last decade. These age groups grew between 2010 and 2020, namely the 20 to 35-year-olds who were 10 to 15 in 2010. The positive change demonstrates the attractiveness of Venice for college-age outsiders. Finally, the back end of the chart shows the major declines that Venice has been facing for centuries. The would-be residents in their 20s find it hard to remain in Venice, since the exodus starts by the time they're in their mid-30s and reaches a steady state between 40 and 60 years of age, with an average loss of over 300 residents. We'll now move into the key questions we focused on throughout our time on this project. Our first question, which you've seen before, is what is the driving loss of residents in Venice? This is the important question, as answering this gives us a window into the possible solutions to the decline. Our next question was, will there be another population rebound? This question, while not obvious, is hopeful and leads us directly into our final question of how can the city be encouraged to rebound? This question is where all of our data and research will hopefully come together to give possible solutions or fixes to the problems we've highlighted. So now we're going to do a little thought experiment, highlighting the struggles a Venetian resident faces. First things first, every resident needs a home. To be able to pay for that home, you need a job. And to be able to get to that job, you need transportation. These create the three main pillars of life in Venice.
So we're going to take the place of a resident of Venice who's grown up here and is now taking the step to leave their home and enter the Venetian economy. We're going to so part of this is being able to find an affordable home. And so we're going to look at the different sestieri throughout the historic city. And here we have a graph that we created that takes average housing data from each sestieri and then shows them visually on this graph over time. So the most recent data we have is from October 2021, and these numbers indicate that the cheapest sestieri is the Giudecca. So the cheapest house for rent will be located on the Giudecca, and the average rent for this house is about 1,300 euros per month. And all of these numbers assume a unit that's about 100 square meters. So for the cheapest sestieri, on average, has about $1,300 rent. And then if we were to switch it over to sale prices, we have the same graph here, but now it depicts the different sestieris in their average sale prices. And here we can see that the cheapest sestieri would be Castello, where the average house sells for 412,000 euros. Thing is, when taking into account purchasing a house, you need to take into consideration the mortgage that you'll be paying. And so we're going to calculate that. We take that average house for 412,000 euros, and then the requirement of a 20% down payment, that would take off about 80,000 euros, and that brings us down to 330,000 euros roughly. So that's the loan principal on the mortgage, and with an interest rate of 1.5% over 30 years, that monthly payment is going to be about 1,100 euros each month. So what we have is two options where renting is cheaper, is more expensive each month, and buying is cheaper, but buying has that upfront payment that's about 82,000 euros, which is a great barrier for entry for many young Venetians that are entering the economy. So now that we have looked at housing, we need to be able to look at jobs so that we can then afford such housing. And so the jobs that you're going to be able to find in Venice, the historic city of Venice, that is going to be mostly tourism jobs. Tourism-related jobs make up about 2/3 of the jobs in the historic city. Jobs like a chef, taxi driver, shop clerk, ferry captain, or a waiter. These are the jobs that you're going to be able to find in the city more often than not. The problem with these jobs and the challenges that the Venetians face that have these jobs is that they don't pay particularly well. Here we have average take-home salaries per month for a select set of tourism jobs. This is month post-tax, and that this is the amount that they take home each month. And so here at the bottom, you can see we have an average salary each month being around 2,200 euros in the historic city. So now, if we take this into account, we have the average salary of 2,200 euros, and then a general consensus between financial planners is that you should be spending no more than 30% of your income on your housing each month. And so in this case, that would be around 658 euros each month. And in either case, either renting or buying that house, each month you're left short. Renting, you're left in a bigger hole than you are if you are paying your mortgage each month with the example we showed before. And so what are the options that the Venetians have left when facing this problem? So they can go out and try and find a non-tourism job in the historic city. The difficulty is these only make up about 1/3 of the jobs in the city and are limited in their availability. So many Venetian residents look outside of the city, out to the mainland, to go and find a job. And this opens this greater variety of jobs and a higher likelihood to find a job that will be paid enough, that'll pay enough to afford the house that we have looked at, the houses we've looked at before. And then with the job outside of the city, you need to be able to navigate the transportation to and from your job throughout the city, back and forth to the mainland. And so the residents have two major transportation options, whereas they can own and drive a car in the city, where you have to pay to have a parking spot. Parking is limited in the historic city, so that increases cost, having to pay for that spot, and also upkeep for the car, different maintenance, gas, and repairs. And the other option being the public transportation, which will decrease the cost incurred by owning a car, but will instead increase the commute times to and from work. And so we have an example here. We're taking this example trip from here in H3 out to the Mestre Shopping Center. If you have a car, once you get to your car from Giudecca, it's about 23 minutes from round trip, one way, each way. And then if you were to do that same commute using only public transportation, that trip is about 3 times as long, taking about an hour. And so this is an hour each way, so that's about 2 hours total commuting each day. So looking at this introduces concept of travel fatigue, whereas a commuter going back and forth each day that might not necessarily be worth it for different residents in the city. So the challenges that we've discussed, Venice has many challenges, and these challenges being in housing. The housing market has increased over the years and is now pricing out the residents of the city. So these people aren't able to afford the houses in the city as much as they used to be, and they're now being forced to look onto the mainland where housing is cheaper. There also the limited job diversity in the historic city limits the ability of high-wage workers to live in the city, and these high-wage workers to be able to afford the housing. So they're being forced again to look off-site into the mainland. And finally, in the mobility section, the mobility just being incredibly burdensome to the residents, either in costs, where you're buying a car and renting a spot, or if you're using public transit and it costs you your time. And so these 3 main pillars of Venetian life, we have make up our vision of the exclusion of Venetian residents, as they're intertwined together, and they all accumulate in one big driving factor that we believe are bringing people out of the city.
So first, I will dive into how job diversity contributes to the exclusion of Venetian residents. So tourism-related careers have made up the majority of the job sector in Venice since the early 20th century. They made up over 50% of the job market in 1901. Tourist arrivals have increased since then, and even in the last 15 years have doubled. Currently, about 2/3 of the job market is comprised of tourist-related jobs. So this is the current breakdown of the industries in Venice. It includes 19 different job sectors, and some are so insignificant, they only appear as slivers in the chart. But I'd like to draw your attention to 4 major sectors on this chart, which is commerce, transportation, hospitality, and tourist services. They make up about 65% of the jobs. We took a sample of the median salaries of 5 tourism-related jobs. So they range from 45,000 euros per year to 111,000 euros. The average median of this sample is around 67,500 euros per year. In comparison, we also took the sample of median salaries of 5 tourism-related jobs. These range from about 16,000 euros to 49,000 euros a year. The average median salary of these jobs is just over 26,000 euros. Because of the overwhelming presence of tourism jobs in the historic city, the average yearly salary is only around 34,000 euros per year, skewing towards the lower end of the spectrum. The employment status influences the housing. You can see the intertwine between our 3 main sectors here, specifically between job diversity and housing. So this data was taken from an online survey with about 10,000 respondents, which is about 20% of the current population. It makes it one of the larger surveys performed in recent years, which shows the sheer magnitude and accuracy of the data. As you can see, most current residents work and study in Venice, and most former residents work and study outside of Venice. But what I would like to point you to is the people that the current residents that commute outside of Venice and the former residents that commute into Venice. It is overwhelmingly more people, more former residents, work and study and have to commute into Venice than those that have to work outside of Venice, which shows that more people cannot afford to live in the city that they choose to work and study in. Now we will segue into how housing contributes to the exodus of residents. We've collected data since 2013 on rental prices throughout the city. The average rental price of each sestieri has increased until 2020, since the pandemic hit. We have found another aspect that mirrors this same trend. Currently, there are enough beds in Venice for about 131,000 people, which is about 38,000 dwellings. There are only 51,000 people living in the city, leaving many buildings vacant. So landlords have been buying up these properties and renting them out to tourists. In 2016, you'll see that non-hotel beds surpassed the total number of hotel beds. So in 1997, non-hotel beds, which are Airbnbs and private rentals, were about 1/5 of the number of hotel beds, and the total was only 13,000 beds for tourists. But because of the boom in tourism in the 2000s, non-hotel beds increased to about half the size of hotel beds, and increased by 7,000 beds available to tourists in just 5 years. The total increased there's 20,000 total tourist beds. By 2010, the total increased by 8,000 to around 28,000 total beds. By 2015, it increased by 6,000 for a total of 33,000 tourist beds. And by 2017, the non-hotel beds surpassed the number of hotel beds. So in 2019, the total number of beds for tourists reached 59,000, 16,000 more beds than 2 years previous. The non-hotel beds is now double the amount of hotel beds. So here we compare the number of residents versus the number of tourist beds. So while the residents have declined, the number of tourists staying over in the city has increased steadily up until 2016, where the number of overnight guests greatly increased. The number of tourists seems equal to the number of residents. However, it does not include the number of daily tourists. So the number of tourists that enter the city every day is actually much greater than the number of residents. So the growth of Airbnb is parallel to the growth of rental prices. So in 2016, you could see that the higher concentration of Airbnbs is in St. Mark's Square, which also shows it is the most expensive place to rent in the city. Now, over the years, you could see that the higher the concentration in each neighborhood, the higher the rental prices. Therefore, the number of Airbnbs also correlates to the higher rental prices. So the average rent prices per sestiere in the historic city, Giudecca has the lowest average price, with about 1,300 euros per month. However, it is still much more expensive than the average prices on the mainland. The most expensive area to live it only is about 1,015 euros per month, which is 300 euros per month less than Giudecca. So rental prices are nearly 1.5 times more expensive on the historic city than on the mainland. So for a person looking to rent, the mainland would be more attractive. The difference between sale prices between the historic city and mainland are even greater. The least expensive area to buy a house is Costello, with the average house selling at about 412,000 euros. The most expensive area to buy on the mainland, the average house is only 193,000 euros. So sale prices are 2.5 more expensive in the historic city than the mainland, and housing is becoming increasingly more unaffordable in the city. While living in the mainland is more affordable, residents have to take into account the increased commute into the city.
So this leads to the mobility aspect of our whole exclusion of residents study. So basically, we have to know that the movement around in Venice is challenging and very time-consuming. So over here, we have this clock that shows how much time it takes to move from one place to another. So in a 4.8 kilometer distance in Venice, it can take from Piazzale Roma to Santa Elena, it can take 60 minutes. And the same distance in Boston, Massachusetts can take 12 minutes. So you can see the difference from Venice to Boston. And it's mostly based because of the water transportation and the narrow pedestrian walkways that Venice has, which can result in this unpleasant mobility experience, basically. And over here we have this map that shows the distance from Accademia to Mestre and how it is difficult to move outside of the historic city. So from Accademia to Mestre, it can take around 53 minutes. So imagine doing that commute every single day. But it doesn't mean that the mobility inside the city is easier. It's also very challenging. So this one over here is a map that has an isochrone, which is a geographical region that shows how much you can move in a specific amount of time. So in 5 minutes, you can move around this area. That's the maximum location you can reach. Around 10 minutes, you can move that much, and around 15 minutes, you can move that much by walking. So in 15 minutes, you can't go around the whole historic city. So even if you have a job inside the historic city, the mobility would still be difficult, which leads us to understand why people might be leaving. So I want to show you guys this graph. It's a survey that was collected it was about 10,000 people that show it's the comparison between the current residents and the former residents and why they chose to leave. So we want to understand if their reasons are the same that we have been looking into. So basically over here, I'm going to start focusing on the former residents because these actually took the initiative to leave. So we want to understand why they chose to leave. The highest graph actually is by it's because of personal reasons. So those are uncontrollable and might be because someone chose to move out because they wanted to look into other cultures, or they moved with someone else, a partner, or if they wanted to study somewhere else. So those we can't really control. But the ones that we can actually look into is why they said that there's too many tourists in the historic city and that Venice is too expensive, as well as the limited job opportunities. So they actually showed all of these aspects that we've been trying to expose in here of the exclusion of residents. And after they provided the reasons for why they left, we've also seen some recommendations that they've given to solve some of these issues. So the first one would be to foster commercial and productive activities for residents rather than tourists. And so less licenses for activities that encourage tourism and more cultural and repopulation projects. And the third one would be to increase taxes for those who host tourist rentals and hotels, as well as raise the quality criteria for those tourist accommodations. And then this leads us to those solutions that we are trying to improve, we are trying to show, which the first one to tackle the housing issue would be to get rid of the down payments, which would be a practical thing, not a big policy. It would be an actual action that we could take. And then for the job aspect would be investing in creating an ecosystem for higher paid jobs, which would help get a better housing. And the third part to tackle the transportation issue would be to decrease the commute times in and around the city. So if we all mix it together, then it will be a great reason to make that rebound happen here in the city, in the historic city of Venice. But if you want to look more in depth to all of these issues, you can go into our data repository that we've created with all the data, and if you still are interested, you can go in there, or into our results summary, which also provides all of these issues to the contribution of the depopulation of Venice. Thank you so much for listening, and we can now take any questions about this. So if you also have any questions later on, you can feel free to contact us on our personal email or the group email as well.
Questions or comments from the streaming? Does anybody monitoring that? Nothing? No questions from streaming? Congratulations then. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, we'll get the next. The next one is at, what time is it?
4:30.
Next one is in 15 minutes, so we're going to take a 15-minute break because we have them on a set schedule. And I just wanted to say one thing about the past presentation we just heard, that the last 3 bullets they had were about increasing, making, creating an ecosystem of innovation, which is what Serendipity tries to do. And on the mobility front, Serendipity's only startup is a mobility startup, so we only have to tackle the down payment part, and we do have some ideas about that as well. So we might do some more research on that first topic. Thank you for your insights. Make sure you look at their website. All the stuff you see is all available, and the data is downloadable if anybody wants to do their own analysis. And we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. Welcome back to our streaming of the presentations of the teams from the Worcester Polytechnic Institute 2021 cohort. We're about to see the second of the 3 presentations for today. All presentations today are under the auspices of the Smart Test project, which is a European project that Serendipity, the host of these presentations, is participating in, and today we'll see the second. In a moment, we'll see the second of the 3 presentations for today. As a reminder, the next one will be at 5:30, and it will be on the economic, the cultural economy of Venice, whereas this one that we're about to hear about is about the retail shops of Venice, which is a study that we've been conducting as a Venice Project Center since the early 2000s, and we'll hear all about it from the next team of WPI students.
Hello, everyone. We are a team of students working with Serendipity and Smart Test to analyze the after effects of COVID-19 on Venice's economy, specifically focusing on the retail and hospitality sector. My name's Carmelita Lee, this is Mago Sheehy, and that is Kayla Saro. Smart Test is a research project funded by the EU that focuses on identifying social exclusions and mobilities due to over-tourism. There are currently about 8 case studies in cities throughout Europe that experience the same problem of over-tourism that Venice experiences. The Venice case study is being run in partnership with Serendipity. Post-COVID-19, Smart Test is trying to dedicate themselves to trying to find a sustainable return of tourism. Serendipity is studying the exclusion of Venice's residents through issues that relate to job diversity, mobility, and housing. Our project hopes to help that investigation through an analysis of Venice shops. By recording the shops throughout the city, we will give Serendipity a clear picture of the job diversity in Venice, and our integration of the historic Airbnb data can also help them understand the evolving housing situation. Our mission is to analyze how COVID-19 has impacted the Venetian economy by providing a tool for visualizing the state of the Venetian retail and hospitality sectors before and after the pandemic, with accompanying graphics to highlight important trends that we find in the data. Smart Test is interested in assessing the economies of cities that depend on tourism. As you can see in this graphic, cities start with an initial set of wealth and resources, and they put that wealth into goods and services production. In cities that rely on tourists, those goods and services are consumed mostly by tourists as well as residents. The wealth generated from that gets put back into the initial source of wealth, and that's what creates this cycle that you see. By analyzing the types of shops that are present in Venice, we can assess the goods and services production at any point in time. And by analyzing how those shops change over time, we can also see how the goods and services are being consumed. Things such as if we see a trend of hotels or souvenir shops opening, it can indicate an increasing dependence on tourism. But on the other side, if we see a closure of souvenir stores and openings of real estate agencies, it can indicate a shift away from over-tourism and trying to get Venetian residents back into the historical city. Now, this isn't the first time this project has been done, as in the past, 8 WPI teams over the years have come to Venice and collected their own shops data. In these pictures, you can see that each year was able to collect a different amount of stores in different areas of Venice. And in total, there have been about 7,175 unique stores collected. Here is an example of a picture that we put into our database when collecting data. This picture has the name of a store, the address, and the type of store that it is. In the past, the teams have collected different features of stores, different numbers of data points, and have collected the information differently. However, no matter what, the same information, the name, address, and type have all been collected by the same, the name, address, and type have been collected each year in the same way. Each year has been recorded as well, and the latitude and longitude of the shop were recorded as well. To complete our goal here, we made 4 key contributions that we will be discussing shortly.
So our first major contribution is the development of an app to house all the previous and current shop data. So here's a capture of our app. As you can see, the background is a map of the historical city of Venice, and each of the dots on the map represent a location of a shop. So as Carmelita mentioned, 8 different teams have gone throughout Venice and collected data, and each of these 8 teams all developed their own version of the application to house their data. So for example, 2014, 2005 team, they each made an application that showed just their data throughout the city, and they used those to analyze trends, among other things. But the difference with our application is that we have all the data from all the previous years in one central place. So no more databases will have to be, or no more applications will have to be developed in the future. So the first feature of our application is that we can filter data by year. So as you can see, in the first image, all the shops in the entire city are on the map. And in the second, now that 2004 was selected in the years collected, right here, only the shops collected in 2004 show up on the map. So if I go over to the application, we can see here's all the shops in the entire city. I can choose any city from this drop-down list, or any year, sorry. So if I want to see all the data collected in 2012, here it is. I can add 2011 and 2010. And we can see all the data from those 3 years overlapped on top of each other. The next feature we've implemented is the ability to cycle through years. So one way you can see the difference between shops across years is by individually selecting each year, 2010, and going through and selecting 2011. You can see the difference. But this cycling feature allows you to select any set of years. You can cycle through and see how the data collected in those years has evolved over time. The next feature we've implemented is the ability to filter by sestiere. So if I clear these year filters, we can sort by data only in a given sestiere, for example, Santa Croce, or we can show only in Giudecca. And all these data points are overlapping at the same time. So these are all the data points ever collected in these 2 regions, but if I want to filter by year as well, I can select, say, 2021. And these are all the data points that our team has collected in these 2 sestiere. The next feature we've implemented is the ability to filter by shop type. So as you can see here, bakery, library, and knives are selected. So all the shops of these types are showing up on the map. So there have been 120 unique types that previous teams have used to categorize shops. So these are designed to be able to define every single store. So they have one for anything you can think of. They have a bookstore, an eyewear store, a clothing store. And we've taken these 120 unique types and divided them into 10 super categories. And here are the super categories. So this makes it a lot easier to filter through all these types when you're trying to decide which types you want to show on the map. And they also provide you with the option to select the super category when you're filtering and show every single type at the same time that fits into the super category. So if we remove our filters and say we want to show every single type of clothing store, now we've added all those to the filters, and these are all the clothing stores. We can select different years as well, 2018, 2015, and the cycling feature still works the same. So our next key contribution was the collection of 1,500 data points by us across the city. So the way we did this is through our mobile application. So as Carmelita mentioned as well, all the previous teams have had their own methods of collecting data. Some of them went around with pencil and paper and just jotted down the name and the address of all the shops they went to. Some of them used Google Forms, and some of them even developed their own applications purely for collecting. But our application allows you to enter data just straight from within the application, and you can do it on your phone on the go. So any data you add is automatically added to the database, and this application will allow future teams to collect data as well. So as you can see on the phone, the application functions the exact same. It looks the exact same. It's just a slightly miniaturized version, and we've implemented some features to make it even easier to use on the mobile devices. So our team has collected 1,481 stores across the city. We tried to get a good sample from all the different sestiere. So we've gotten about 100 or more from every sestiere except for San Polo so far. So before the term is over, we hope to hit San Polo, and we also hope to finish up Cannaregio up top and Castello. So the next features we implemented into the app are the ability to look at specific shops. So if you click any of the dots on the map, a little pop-up will show up that'll give you some more information about that shop. So I clicked the sample shop before I took the screenshot. So we can see the shop that I clicked, the most recent data collection was in 2021 for that point. It was called Computer Fix. There's an image of it here. And it was a computer services shop. And we provide the ability to look at any previous entries if you click this button down here. Back in 2004, it used to be a souvenir shop. It didn't have a name, and it did not have a picture. So a lot of the data points collected by previous teams either did not have pictures or have pictures scattered throughout various Google Drive folders. So we've been able to uncover a good number of pictures, but we haven't been able to implement all of them into the application yet. So I clear these filters. I can click on a dot. We're a different version. There we go. Click on the dot, and we can see the name of the shop, the address, a picture. If the picture is too small to see, you can always, if the Wi-Fi cooperates, click the image and have it open up in a new tab. Yeah, here we go. So we can see it looks like there's selling antiques in there, and the address number is 2249, and that information is reflected in the pop-up. And this shop has some previous data. It looks like back in 2004, it had the same name, the same type, but obviously no picture as well. So we also have the ability to edit any data that's already in the database and to delete any data. So when you're editing data, you can change the image, the name, the year, and the type, and you can flag entries to be reviewed later. So this is helpful if you're ever encountering a store that you think was entered incorrectly in the past, or if you enter one accidentally incorrectly, you can go in and edit it. So if we go back to our application, say I want to edit this from 2004, if I'm convinced that it used to have a different name, I can go in and change the name. I'll name it test. I can input an image. Let's just put a random image from 2004. And I can flag it and say, new name, and if I ever want to go back in and wonder why this one has a picture, I can see, oh, I must have changed this one recently. So I don't actually want to change this data point, so I'll cancel that for now. So in terms of entering new data, when you're entering new data, there's two different scenarios you could be in. Either you're going to a store that's already been collected in the past, or you're going up to a store that's never been collected. So if you're entering a store that has already been collected in the past, all you have to do is click the corresponding dot by zooming in on the map and finding out where you are and just clicking the dot and hitting the add button up top. This will show you a similar screen to the edit button, to the edit feature, and you have to input an image, a name, a year, and a type. We don't want any problems with images like they had in the past, so an image is required to make the submission, and the year automatically updates to match the current date. So if I want to add a new entry for this place, let's say I just took a picture of it. So in this demo, I've been using pictures that I have downloaded on my computer, but when you're actually in the field using the application on your phone, you can take a picture right from within the application. Let's say now it's called test name. Let's pretend the year is 3000 so we can find this data point later. So now it's a warehouse. I can submit that data point, and if the Wi-Fi cooperates, yep. We'll see, it's being submitted into the database, and now it is in the application. So we can go take a look at that in a minute. If you want to add an entirely new location, say you walk up to a store and there's not a dot there for the specified store, you hit this button up top, the add location button, and the process is essentially the same, except for you have to add the address and the coordinates as well. So if I want to add a new place, let's say I want to add a new shop in Giudecca, give it a test street, number 123. So instead of manually entering in the 6, 7-digit latitude and longitude numbers, all you have to do is click this find coordinates, and you can click any place in the map, and it will automatically determine the coordinates. We can insert a picture, we'll name it demo, and we'll say the year is 3000 as well. And we can submit that. Now, if I reload the page to let all the filters and everything reset, we should be able to filter by any data collected in the year 3000 to see those 2 data points. Yeah. So obviously, I don't want these data points in the database, so we can go in and filter by 3000 later and delete them. So the next feature we've implemented is Airbnb data. So we received some Airbnb data from the population team, and we were able to add it into our map. So this selection down here at the bottom, the Airbnb filter, will allow you to add any Airbnb layers that you desire. So each dot on this map represents an Airbnb that was present in the city in 2012. So if I get rid of this 3000 filter, we can add in Airbnb data from, say, 2018. We can add 2020 as well. As you can see, there are a lot of Airbnbs in the city. See, in just these 2 years, there are a combined total of almost 8,000. And you can show the Airbnbs and shops data simultaneously with this selection down here. So when this selection is on, whatever year you're showing in terms of shops, it will also layer the Airbnb data as well. So we can turn this function on and cycle the years, and we can see how the shops and the Airbnb data have evolved together over time. As you can see, Airbnbs kind of take over as the years approach the current year. There are a few more features: the ability to reset the map view, the ability to zoom in on your current position, changing the size of the points, which is very helpful when you're on the mobile version and it's hard to tap the little dots, and some additional filters. And the final feature that's very helpful in terms of analysis is downloading the data. So when you hit this button, any information that's currently on the screen that matches the filters you've selected will be downloaded into a CSV. You can open that in any program like Excel and have a series of useful columns to deal with that help with analysis.
All right, so the next thing that we have for our key contributions is our analysis booklet. In this booklet, it is basically a copy of this presentation, but with a little bit more data, because we can explain stuff in this presentation, but we can't explain it for you when you're reading the booklet. So the booklet will be written to explain what we are talking about in this presentation. So some analysis on the data that we have collected in previous years and this year. So these graphics show out of all the stores collected in each year, which are closed and which are open, starting from 2004, working all the way to 2021 on what we have collected so far. So out of all these, you can see that there are a few that look the same, and there are a few that look a lot different than the other ones. Some of them that look the same are 2005, 2010, and 2021. These all have roughly the same exact number of data collected throughout the year, and then also relatively close, the same number of closed stores. So we decided to look at these to see if COVID had impacted stores, causing them to close more than what they typically would in a normal year. So out of the data, it seems like we can't really tell if COVID has done too much to the Venetian retail sector. We don't know if this is just because we caught it too late and now stores were able to start opening back up, say, early this summer. And when we go and collect them in the fall here, they're already open, so we don't get them as a closed store. Let's say maybe last fall in 2020, sure, we could have probably found a lot more stores that were closed, whether it was either just tourist or stores that depended solely on tourism, or a mix of tourists and residents, but weren't able to get enough business to stay open throughout the pandemic. So then we also have, for a few years, the closed stores in each of the sestiaries collected. So with these, we have 2004, 2010, 2012, and 2021. So in these 4 years, we were able to get data on at least 5 of the sestiaries. And what's interesting in this graphic is that it seems like in 2004 and 2012, other than the addition of Castello in 2004 rather than 2012, that the spread of the closed stores in each year are very similar. But when you look at our year in 2021, it's a lot different, but that is also to be noted that we have collected a lot more data, say, in Costello than all the previous years. So with that, Costello has made roughly a third of all of our total data points. And as represented in the donut chart here, it represents just about a third of all of our closed stores. So hopefully, within the rest of this term, when we finish collecting Cannaregio and Costello, maybe we can see some sort of a shift in the Costello section, allowing all the other cistiaries of 2021 to be less of a percentage, and maybe we can see some sort of similarity between previous years and this year on the closings. Thank you to finishing collecting data in Cannaregio and Costello. Here are some just close-ups of the years. All of these numbers are in percentages. So in 2004, Cannaregio was about 35% of all the closings. 2010, Dorsoduro was the highest with 28% of all the closings. 2012, Cannaregio again with about 34% of all closings. And then this year, where we have 31% of all of our closings in Costello. So the next part of our deliverables is the secondary website for data visuals. On this website, we will be housing all of the visuals that we have created. And let me display that real quick. So this is the website here. On this page, the home page, we talk a little bit about how we are doing our project and why we are doing it. Then we have our graphics tab. This is housing the graphics that are in our presentation right now, and then any additional graphics that we're able to make later. And these ones, once they're updated at the end of the term, will be added. Then on this tab, we have our team website, then a tab for our application, and then a tab for our bibliography for the project so far. This concludes our presentation. Are there any questions? Thank you for your time and attention. These are our contacts if you have any comments or questions later on. Thank you.
All right, for those who are connected on the streaming channel, we're going to take another 10-minute pause before the final presentation for the night, which will start at 5:30. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. Good evening again. Welcome back on the live streaming from the H3 factory on the Giudecca, hosted by Serendipity as part of the WPI final presentations for teams that were in Venice for the past 2 months. And this is the last of the presentations for today, all dedicated to the tourism issues and in connection with the Smart Desk project. So we'll pass the baton immediately to the next team.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Pignon. This is Laura Dufresne, Danforth Kennerson, and Emma Carlton. We are a group of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute conducting a project with a company in Venice called Cosmo. The program was created in response to the artistic and cultural needs of the artistic sector. Our project continues to address these needs in the Venetian economy. The program, Cosmo, aims to support the artists of Venice by providing easy access to resources they will need, such as exhibition space, studios, tools, equipment, and more. Our project will contribute to the efforts of this organization to identify growth opportunities for new models in the cultural and artistic sector of Venice. Additionally, our project aims to identify gaps and opportunities for each of the cultural categories that Cosmo provides, ultimately developing viable proposals for Cosmo to optimize upon. Venice is known worldwide for its rich cultural events held throughout the year. It is also known as a spectacular tourist destination, attracting millions of visitors and enabling the arts to thrive. According to our sources, there are 912 venues where cultural events occur in the historic city. These venues are spread out among both the islands and the mainland, but the map showed on screen marks the most relevant venues to our project. Venice is also known for its year-round events featuring film, art, theater, architecture, music, and dance. These venues were mapped and categorized to gain insight into their cultural importance. The major festivals include the Venice Biennale, the Venice Film Festival, Carnevale, and Festa della Senza. These events are also globally famous, attracting mass amounts of tourists to the city. In order to acquire the data needed to make our project possible, our team partnered with a company called eVenice. eVenice is an online calendar of all the events in Venice, such as ongoing exhibitions, live music, and even nightclub parties. Their website allows the user to discover all of the events and exhibitions occurring by searching the date, category, or organizer. These events are geolocated as well, allowing users to find the best route possible in order to reach their target destination. eVenice separates their events into categories, including art and culture, exhibitions, museums, theater and entertainment, by night and evenings, opera and classical music, and city life and sports. Using the data we acquired from eVenice, we created an interactive map displaying the locations of the venues hosting these events. This map is hosted on our project website, the Osservatorio d'Arte Venezia, which aims to provide a place where anyone can explore the cultural sector of the historic city. When creating this map, we had 4 main features in mind: a user-friendly interface, a search bar and filter settings, an interactive map display, and live updates. The first of these is the user-friendly interface. Our map features intuitive buttons, text fields, and filter settings, allowing users to navigate our website and our data with ease. Second is the search bar and filter settings. On our map, users are able to search through venues by name and keyword, as well as filter results by category or by the dates of the events. Third is the interactive display. On our map, venues are indicated by point markers, which can be color-coded by category. Upon clicking one of these markers, the name of the venue is displayed, and the relevant information about the events hosted at this venue are brought into focus on the sidebar. Finally, live updates. We wanted our map to be able to display the most recent and relevant data. To accomplish this, we stored our data in an online database, which is accessed live by our website. When a user enters their desired search information and filter settings, the database sends only the appropriate information to the map to be displayed. The use of a database also allows for future-proofing. That is, if in future there are more venues or events which are created, they can be easily added to the database, and the website will update accordingly.
We will now dive into the analysis of all identified events by eVenice and the city data from Venice, Italy. So Venice is a small city, but when compared to other major cities across the world, Venice, Italy has the most venues per capita. Now, what does this mean? Tokyo has a population of about 14 million people. New York City has a population of about 8.5 million, Berlin with 3.6 million, and Venice with only, on the mainland and islands combined, 260,000 residents. With a population of around 260,000 residents, Venice has about 3.53 artistic venues per 1,000 residents. All of the other major cities considered have less than 19 times this number of artistic venues per capita when referring to a residential number. The largest city considered, Tokyo, has almost 54 times the number of population, yet totals less artistic venues at 51 than the city of Venice at 912 venues identified. Now, what does this mean? This means that there is a large focus on art and culture in the city of Venice. This shows that there's a focus within Venice on the importance on the cultural sector. There are a multitude of these venues available for residents to use to their own advantage, demonstrating there are opportunities to further these artistic pursuits with production and collaboration within the city of Venice. Now, there are 90 main venues in the historic city. What does this mean? These venues were deemed most popular by members of the cultural sector in Venice, Italy. These venues were compiled from an original list of locations within the city, and this is where most events are held. These locations were deemed more important in the Venetian cultural sector. Now, how were they identified? Taking the advice of those heavily involved in the arts and culture in Venice, our team has continuously added and removed locations from within the past few months to finally settle upon these 90 venues. Now, we will discuss the distinction between tourism and locals. So in considering the original eVenice data collected using 912 venues, we must acknowledge the differences among all deemed artistic and cultural. The 90 just discussed are main venues that exhibit rich cultural content. They exclude the venues such as nightclubs, bars, and temporary rental spaces that may not be filled throughout the entire year. They only make up, however, approximately 10% of the identified venues from eVenice. Venice is an extremely tourist-driven city, so while there are many venues, the majority will cater towards these tourists. These main venues vetted by locals are venues that tend to cater towards both locals and tourists. The three main cultural players that have been identified are very significant to the Venetian economy. These identified players are the Venice Biennale, the Civici Museums, and the Pinot Collection. These foundations are in charge of many of the art and cultural related events in the island, and specifically in the historical city, whether directly or by funding some of these events. They also hold many of their own locations throughout the city and amount for most of the visitors to Venice, especially towards the visitors of the cultural sector. So out of all of the temporary exhibitions in Venice, Italy, the Venice Biennale is the most visited. So a great example of the amount of tourists and visitors that the Venice Biennale brings can be an example from the spring of this past year in 2021. The Venice Biennale of Architecture amassed 31,000 visitors in the first 24 days, so this is just over the first 3 weeks, with 30% of these visitors coming from abroad. This large influx of visitors meant that through the first opening days in the city, hotel rooms were booked and the city was very busy. It attracted almost 600,000 visitors to the Art Biennale in 2019. This is more than double the amount of visitors of any other temporary exhibition in the entire country. Displayed on the left is a graph of the most visited temporary exhibitions in Italy in the most recent data set, 2019. The nearly 600,000 visitors approach the sum of all visitors to Rome's top 4 temporary exhibitions combined. Although this exhibition is temporary, the event runs annually, altering between visual arts and architecture. This means that the exhibition is not only well known, but heavily advertised. This next graph to the left displays the most visited temporary exhibitions in the city of Venice itself. Now, compared to the other temporary exhibitions in Venice, the Venice Biennale dominates with almost 9 times the number of total visitors than the next most popular event. The total number of visitors from the 3 other temporary exhibitions displayed above amounts to just about 116,000 visitors. Now, this is more than 5 times smaller still than the total numbers of visitors of the Giardini and Biennale at about 600,000. The second deemed most popular, the second cultural player we would like to look at is the Civici Foundations. Now, the Civici Museums have 13 locations across the historic city and house over 700,000 works of art and culture. The foundation hosts research and education pieces on their collection and go into history about the city. They also take part in temporary exhibit production, lending pieces to other museums as part of their own exhibits. In 2019, the Civici Museums combined were visited by nearly 2.3 million people. This is the largest amount of visitors for any foundation or venue in Venice, and it proves its influence on Venetian art and culture. So the graph to my left shows the total number of visitors per year to the Civici Museums from 2015 to 2019. You can note the peak on the visitors in 2017 at almost 2.5 million visitors that year. The low can be noted is about 2.2 million. So this is only about 300,000 people less than the peak. So although you can note a slight incline and then a slight decrease, this is nothing to worry about and it is not significant. This next graph displays the total number of visitors to the Civici Museums in 2019, but the data is now sorted by month. Note that 2019 is still the most recent data we have collected. You can see the peaks in April and May. This is due to the visitor influx from the Biennale that was previously mentioned. More tourists are coming into the Biennale to see these exhibitions. Now, while they're here, maybe they'll go see the Civici Museums as well. Once the Biennale ends, however, you can note that the visitor declines. These are the months of November, December, January, February, and even March. Another important figurehead in the cultural economy is the Pinault Collection. So funded by Francis Pinault, the 26th richest man in the world, this is a private institution that houses many of his collected pieces of artwork. With over 10,000 pieces of art made by nearly 400 artists, it is a vast collection of art for tourists and locals alike to see. In 3 locations listed on the screen, there are 3 locations listed on the screen. However, we do not have the data that we had for the Biennale and the Civici Museums. This is because it is a private institution. However, we decided to include it due to its importance of abundance of artwork that it provides to the city.
Next up, we'll talk about the associations present in Venice. These help drive, promote, and fund culture in the city. So there are many active associations based in the whole city of Venice. But in the historic center of the city, there are almost 1,200 associations, 48% of which are invested in the culture. These work closely with the artistic sector, and that because nearly half of these island associations are related to culture, this implies that culture plays a key role in the dynamic of the city, and that the people of the city are invested in keeping this true. Now, returning to our mission statement, we are looking to identify growth opportunities for new models in the cultural and artistic sector of Venice to support our program at Cosmo. To do this, we can look at what Cosmo has done previously and build off of that as a foundation. Cosmo was created in order to fulfill the artistic and cultural needs of the island. Now, it answers the demand for new production models by supplying artists and producers with a space and technology that can allow them to express themselves in innovative and new ways. It integrates the assets of various production spaces in order to produce a multitude of artistic works. As you can see on the slide here, we have anything ranging from music to exhibits to broadcasting. These are many diverse examples of how Cosmo can provide services. First up, we have music. Many performances have taken place in the apse of the church. For those present, you can look left. There's also on the screen a setup that was performed here in July of 2020. This was a recording session, and the band or performers that were playing here were recorded in the apse because of its beautiful acoustic properties. Music can also be produced and recorded here in a fully equipped studio that is present at Cosmo. Next up, we have installations. Room in and around the apse can allow the church to be used for installations. They can be set up, viewed, and done with ease. This pictured here is a sound installation called 80 Mesh by Mirto Balani. This was shown here in February of 2020 and used many speakers and sound tables as a performance piece. Likewise, we have exhibits, very similar, as they can be used in the apse and surrounding areas to display works of art for people to come by and see. On the screen, you can see a collaborative installation by Brian Eno and David Tremlett. This was done in September of 2020 and featured a vase that would emit sounds as well as other surrounding pieces in the apse. Cinema is a unique area that Cosmo can fill. The space inside the church is large enough to build interior sets for movies and store the equipment needed for them. Here on the screen, you can see a film that was shot with a fully built interior scene in the church where we are standing right now. This was done from October to December of 2020 and shows that the space has multiple functions ranging from the music to cinema. Lastly, Cosmo can take on broadcasting. It's equipped with a sound studio that can be used to create and share alternative digital medias, such as podcasts, video streams, and other sorts of digital media. This is a great area for artists to come in and be able to produce work.
We will now be discussing the gaps and opportunities within the scope of Cosmo and overall the historic city. The first major gap within the city that we will be discussing is the fact that education dominates. There are 5 universities in Venice. Ca' Foscari and the IUAV Architecture School are 2 world-class universities. In 2020, their combined number of students amassed to roughly 27,000 people. This number is equivalent to 50% of the residential population present in Venice the same year. This is data taken from only 40% of the universities in Venice, showing that there is still a significant amount of students unaccounted for, implying that people come here to get educated, but they do not stay to work. Venice has a lot of artists present within the city. However, they are not residents. There are many educational paths and exhibitions available, but there are not many independent studios or music labels present, which would show that the owners are residents. Big-name artists can come over and show their works off in touristic sectors, but they cannot stay here and work due to the lack of venues in Venice that can aggregate different needs and integrate different functions under one model. Ideally, venues that are able to produce any type of art can be founded, allowing them to stand on their own. There are only 3 recording studios available on the island. Cosmo provides private recording space for the production of digital audio, as well as equipment, support, and management. Performance space is also available in an acoustically ideal environment for the live performance of vocals, instruments, and more. In Venice, many of the locations equipped to host traveling installations are reserved for the Biennale. This means that independent producers often don't have a place for their work. This allows Cosmo to fill the gap by not only providing a flexible space for the traveling installations to be exhibited, but also offering construction, breakdown support, and storage space to maintain the integrity of the installations. There are many independent and private organizations that rent space to country pavilions. However, these organizations often exclude unaffiliated individuals and producers from using these spaces. This gives Cosmo the opportunity to provide the space to these unaffiliated artists to display their works and host showings. These showings could be either public or private and can display the works or even auction them off at the discretion of the artist. There are many films that come to Venice as a destination location to shoot. However, interior scenes are often filmed elsewhere. Cosmo provides a space for the production of films and movies. Sets can be constructed for the films, along with recording equipment, lighting, and other production necessities. Both indoor and outdoor space can be provided for film showings, along with seating and sound setups. Finally, there are currently no dedicated broadcasting spaces available in Venice. Cosmo fills this void by providing setup space, internet access, technical support, and moderation for digital media broadcasting. Additionally, microphones, cameras, computers, servers, and other technological resources are available for broadcasters to use. For an incubator space, such as the H3 factory, to be sustainable, it needs a source of funding. Employees must be paid for jobs such as set construction, maintenance, and more. Additionally, necessary equipment must be purchased, maintained, and updated. This model can generate income in a variety of ways. A record label could be created to generate income through on-site recording studios and music promotion. Space can be rented out for exhibitions and installations. Tickets can be sold to live performances and film showings, and fees can be applied to the storage and maintenance of traveling exhibitions. These services will provide the funding necessary for Cosmo to become and remain a sustainable model in the modern Venetian cultural economy. There are many opportunities for the Cosmo model to expand and establish itself further in the artistic landscape in Venice. To begin, the H3 factory is a great space. Even at the lowest level of interest, the space can still be rented out. Secondly, there are many areas of art where it is possible to use the same location for both the production and the exhibition of the work. This would be mutually beneficial for both Cosmo and the artists. The artists benefit by not needing to move production equipment or materials between locations, making the process easier, and Cosmo benefits from the increase in business when they provide two services as opposed to just one. Finally, the diverse nature of the services Cosmo and the H3 factory offer allows for artists to produce work in several different categories of art, expanding the possible target audience for the organization. We have come up with a few ideas for how Cosmo can take advantage of these opportunities. To ensure that the H3 factory space remains idle for as little time as possible, the space can be rented out for a variety of different time lengths and price points. Variable rental periods will help to fill the gaps between larger rental times, optimizing opportunity costs and ensuring there is little to no time where the space is not generating income. For collaborative endeavors, film and musical productions are ideal. This is because these two categories take advantage of the possibility for Cosmo to both host and support all steps of the process, from production to exhibition, further increasing profit and popularity. For example, if Cosmo provided a space, set, and equipment for a film to be produced, it can also provide a venue for the showing of the film. Finally, by prioritizing artists and producers local to Venice, Cosmo can not only develop a well-equipped space popular with locals, but can also contribute to the local cultural landscape, promoting the creation and celebration of local art in Venice, ensuring that the city's culture is preserved. Cosmo is an encouraging model that so far has proven its viability in the Venetian cultural economy. The company has the capability to go in several directions in the future, but the most important are that they support the local economy. To conclude, our data has proven the sustainability of the model. Thank you for your time. We are now available for questions. If you cannot think of any within the next few minutes, please feel free to reach out to our team email or our personal email listed to the side. And here is a booklet with a bit more depth into our research.
Thank you. That was the last of today's presentations. We do have a question for the shops team through the chat that we have on the YouTube streaming channel. So can one of you or some of you come up here? All of you? I'll read you the question. It's in Italian, so I'm going to translate it. So comparing the data from the 8 teams that have looked at the shops in the years past, can you reconstruct which shops have changed more than once their typology?
Yeah, so analysis on the types of shops that have changed or the types of shops that haven't changed can be found through the download function in the top right corner of the application. So if you hit the download button, it gives you a CSV that contains one row for every entry, and one of the features in each row is whether or not the location has changed since the last time. So if you just filter by any row that has, or any location that's changed multiple times, you could find any shop that matches that criteria.
Well, thank you. That question was from Piero Toffolo from the streaming chat. So this concludes today's presentation. Thank you all from home that joined us today. I want to remind you that we will have the second set of presentations for this year's cohort of WPI students on Monday, December 6th, same time, 4 p.m. There will be 4 presentations on Monday. These presentations will all be more related to climate and environmental issues in Venice. And we'll hopefully see you all then. And until then, have a good weekend. Now, so if you guys want, there will be an opportunity to have a toast on the Fondamenta on the way to the boat stop. As you walk by, we'll gather our stuff together and walk that way. And then because of COVID, we're not going to do it indoors. And then I remind you that there will be a boat strike after 8 p.m., so we got to get out of here by then. Good job, everyone.